and Audacity in 3, 2, 1.
Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Christina Lynn, and I'm here with my co-host, Marissa Roy. And today's episode, we're going to chat all about holidays.
The Holiday Survival Guide. Reminds me of Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide. Do you remember that?
Nope.
Oh, it was a Nickelodeon show. It was like starting to go like out of season by the time I started watching it. So I was like, maybe, but there's too big of not too much of an overlap.
Nope.
You know what's crazy? This is so off topic. A lot of like our favorite like childhood like Nickelodeon Disney shows, like when you go back on like Disney Plus or Netflix, like they don't have that many seasons to them. Like I went back, Drake and Josh is on Netflix, and there's only like, I forget, it was only like 2 or 3 seasons. There aren't that many in total. And it's like, you just, when it's live aired on TV, like it always feels like there's so many more, right? Like Suits, it's like 9 seasons, 27 episodes each or whatever. But yeah, like that, or what was the other ones? I was really surprised at the Sweet Life on Disney Plus. Sweet Life of Zach and Cody. Like there were like 4 seasons maybe. I was like, seriously? It's crazy.
Those were all shows that my brother really liked. So I'd watch them if they were on, but not something I like sought out.
Yeah. Well, like, I mean, go back and like look at whatever like childhood shows you watched, and like you probably thought there were like a million episodes, but there weren't. I'd be curious to know about like Hannah Montana. That'd be interesting.
And it's actually kind of weird. Like I was looking at our demographics of the podcast before we hopped on today. And because I was thinking, I'm like, man, there are not a lot of people who like remember what it was like to be watching a show and then have to yell to like your brother or sister, like, it's back on. And they
Yeah.
had to like run, like you couldn't TiVo it, I guess that was kind of like in high school, that was a thing. But like back in like elementary school, middle school, it's back on.
Yeah. Well, I didn't have to yell at anyone because I didn't have siblings, but I would just
Yeah.
like be excited that it was back on. Or like
Yeah,
when you're waiting for school to be canceled and you're watching the TV and
oh
like the
yeah.
words are rolling out slowly on the bottom and you're just like, come on, Fairfax County, Fairfax County.
Yeah. Yep. Oh man, those were the days. Now they get text alerts. Like how freaking nice.
Wow. Yeah. I just roll over in bed and just take a look. Like we had to walk all the way downstairs, turn on the
Yeah.
TV.
But like how exciting was that? Like
It was
to
the
just be like,
best.
and you'd be like, okay, well, Loudon's closed, like Prince William's closed, like we gotta be next.
I thought it was so fun. Like to
Yeah.
just, yeah, I feel like there's the instant gratification is nice. It's convenient, but I feel like there's those simple pleasures that we don't get anymore because we're just like, we get it all immediately.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully that hit you with a little bit of nostalgia coming back onto the podcast. But yeah, we'll jump into our holiday survival guide.
Yeah. Oh, that's how I got back into it. Okay. I was like, how did we get that far? But yeah, so basically, obviously, when we're recording this November 2nd, it'll probably come out next week. So the 7th. So Thanksgiving's right around the corner. Friendsgivings are right around the corner. And then all the holiday parties and maybe travel that you've got lined up for the holidays or anything in between. So I think at this point, it's just routine to do an episode on like how to best carry and handle yourself. Because I don't expect you guys to scroll back 52 episodes because we have done these in the past, but I think it's important to update with like our new perspectives with where we're at now. So I guess with the holidays in general, like a big part of your success, quote unquote, with a health and fitness journey comes down to what your expectations are from the beginning. And I think that sets the frame for your mindset and how you feel about, entering the season as a whole. Because I think first and foremost, it can be a really different time for a lot of different people. Like it could be really joyful. It could be really exciting. Like I love all these seasons. And for others, it could be really lonely or emotional or sad based on just the life experiences that you've had. And so I think it's important to take those things into account when you are setting expectations for your health and fitness goals, because if you know anything from listening to our podcast is that your emotional state, your ability to regulate the way that you feel, plays a really big role in your behavior, your habits, your consistency, and therefore the results that you see. So if you are really prone to, say, seasonal depression or really negative mental health consequences during the holidays for personal reasons, I would really evaluate, like, what is your stress tolerance like for then adding in a fat loss phase and sacrificing all these desserts, or like what's really going to be the best thing for you in context this holiday season, and just be honest with yourself about that first and foremost.
Yeah. And the other thing I also want to say is, as you were saying that, I love that kind of like pre-frame going into the conversation, but also just kind of like, if you are someone who's like, well, this always happens to me during the holidays, that I always gain 5 to 10 pounds, or I always do this, or I always do that, you can change that.
Yeah.
That does not have to be your reality. And I think that that's really, really important, that like, okay, maybe it is somewhat more stressful for you than normal, or maybe you do have a tougher time. That doesn't mean that you just need to fall into the old habits that you've set for yourself.
Yeah.
So hopefully what we talked to you about today, you know, I don't want you to be like, oh my gosh, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do it. It's like, just maybe pick 1 or 2 things, just a couple different strategies, and try it out. And if you're someone who has multiple events, like, I mean, I was, family divorce. So we had like 3 Thanksgivings, Friendsgivings, all this stuff. It's like, you can try different things at different events, see what works, see what doesn't work. And that's okay. And
Yeah.
so just kind of like, whatever you decide to do, like, there's no one right or wrong, 100% I nailed it or I failed. It's just, all of this is just a learning opportunity for you. So it is possible for you to change your habits and what things have looked like for you in the past.
Yeah, great point. Good call out there of like, okay, yes, your mental health may suffer during these months, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to just like spiral and go downhill. And let's latch on to what you can control, and let's latch on to making that as awesome as possible so you can improve your situation, right? And so it's just, when I say that, I'm going to put an asterisk there of like, understand your mental health and well-being during this season, but don't use it as a crutch, because I think you can be empowered in a lot of ways when you go into healthy habit setting, just not the way that the fitness industry typically wants us to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that one of the best things that you can do that really, I mean, it's a nice transition, is expectation setting, right? So it's like, okay, we don't need to have this idea of like perfect. And it's like, we want to really get away from this all or nothing mentality and just kind of set expectations for yourself. What does success look like for you? So maybe you typically, over the holidays, maybe you gained 5 to 10 pounds. So maybe success for you may be like, well, let me just only gain 5. Or like, let me see if I can just maintain my weight through whatever that may be. Or maybe success is like, hey, normally I have 10 glasses of wine on Thanksgiving. Maybe this time I'm only gonna have 9. Whatever that might look like. Like, there's Marissa and I, like, we might have very different strategies going into the holidays, but it's based off of what is going to make us happy and what is going to make us feel like we were successful throughout this time.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing that I love about everything you said in that is, within each kind of goal example that you set, it's like, we're not talking about like what most women who have not like truly had, I'll honestly say, like coaching and guidance from a coach that can like bring us down to earth, is like, our perception of success is this like unrealistic, crazy feat of like, I'm meal prepping everything and I'm perfect all the time and I'm getting all these workouts in. But it doesn't, the thing is that we don't think that it's unrealistic until we know what like realistic actually looks like. So like, a lot of women can only see that as the path forward, but I want to tell you, there's another way, right? Like,
Yeah.
you can take baby steps, and it is okay. And it doesn't mean that you aren't enough, or that nothing you ever do is good enough, or that you have to be 120% all the time. Like, that 10 to 9 glass of wine example is perfect, because it's like, that doesn't feel much better at all. So celebrating it is not going to be very easy. But if you can pull those little wins and improvements out through this season, you will be on the right track to build more momentum, because soon 9 will become 8 and 8 will become 7 and 7 will eventually get down to 4 or 3 or 2 or maybe even 0. But if you can't celebrate the progress along the way, what's going to happen instead? You're going to beat down on yourself and say, you did it again. You had 9 glasses of wine. Damn it. Why can't you keep your stuff together? And then you're going to self-sabotage the next time the situation comes around, because you said, well, I already messed up, so I might as well just throw in the towel. So if you can celebrate the little wins, you will build momentum towards that long-term success through the holidays and beyond. But yes, I love like the reality shift of like, this is what progress can look like.
Yeah. And I love what you're saying too, because it's those super unrealistic expectations that we set for ourselves. Like, you go into an event and you're like, okay, I'm not going to have any appetizers. I'm not going to have any alcohol. I'm not going to have any desserts. I'm only going to eat protein and vegetables or whatever that may be. And you might be like, yeah, I'm going to be super good. And then I always use apple pie as an example, because that's my thing on the holidays. But like, someone brings over apple pie and you're like, well, maybe just like one bite, right? Like that's not too bad. And then you're like, oh, I've already had one, like, and then that just spirals. And you're like, well, I already had dessert, so I already broke what I said I was going to do. So I might as well have wine. I might as well have this. And then at the end, it's like, oh man, I suck, right? And you have all the, and now I got to do cardio. Now I got to do, and it's like you said, it's like you self-sabotage and you're doing all these behaviors. Whereas if you were to like maybe give yourself permission to say, I'm going to have one piece of dessert, and if I really, really like it, I'll go back for a half or whatever it may be. Or yeah, maybe I'm going to limit myself to maybe 2 or 3 drinks. And that's like, again, like you said, it's better than 4 or 5 or 6 that I'm used to doing in the past. So it's like, if you kind of give yourself that wiggle room and that permission, it's a lot easier to be successful than to be super, super rigid with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to just kind of know going in, like, I'd rather you expect to have something. By the way, we have a full, like a 7/8 of an apple pie sitting in our fridge right now from Costco. It's gigantic.
Oh my gosh.
I actually haven't touched it because I'm like, not yet. Like, it's not my thing like that much. But anyways, I would rather you allocate it in and say, you know what, this is going to be the thing that I'm going to enjoy. Like, this holiday just means so much to me. And I think it's like also knowing like what these holidays mean to you. Like, some people really love Halloween and Halloween candy. I couldn't give 2 shits. I had like one little fun size Snickers the other day from the gym because they just had them out after the workout. And I was like, sure. Otherwise, didn't have any Halloween candy. But Thanksgiving, your girl can put some food down, right? So it's just like, which ones are the most important to you? Like, which ones like bring you the nostalgia and that feeling, right? It's like, lean into those, give yourself the permission for those. But the ones that don't matter, like, you don't have to partake or indulge if you don't actually care. If you do care about all of them, great, we'll work with that. But like, I don't know. For me, it's kind of like there's levels to it, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And I think I'm like, how many times a year do I actually have apple pie? I'm like once or twice. And so when that
Yeah.
opportunity presents itself, like absolutely, I'm going in and I'm having apple pie. The only time I wouldn't is if I was, on prep or something like super crazy.
Yeah.
But like other times, like absolutely, like that is a heck yes food for me, and I'm gonna go all in.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm
definitely.
not gonna have the whole pie, but
Yeah, but then it's like you gave yourself permission, you have the slice, and you're like, awesome, I did it. That was my slice. I'm so happy.
another
Versus
365 days until my next one.
versus like saying I'm not going to have any and then like actually eating the whole pie because it's the last opportunity that you can. That's
Yeah.
called the Last Supper syndrome. It's a real thing. And it's like the idea that we think we have to get it all in because it's the last time that we're going to do it because we're going to be better tomorrow. But in reality, we just needed to give ourselves permission in the first place. So
Yeah. I actually, so He Fit, she did a really good reel on this yesterday. the Snickers example that she gives all the time is she did a contest prep and I think she ate a full size, not even like a fun
Yeah.
size. She ate a
And
full size
she's
Snickers.
fun size. Like she's
Yeah.
small.
Yeah, she's very small frame. So she gave herself permission. And that Snickers used to be like her, I think she kind of said that she always used to have this like restriction. And so for
Mhm.
whatever reason, she was like, if she had, even just a bite, it would turn into, she would just have a ton of them. So she kind of had this thing where she gave herself permission. She goes, at the end, she's like, I didn't even want them anymore. And she was like, now I'm not saying that you need to just take your foods that you binge on and just have at it for 10 weeks, or whatever. She was like, but if you do give yourself permission, they start to not have that forbiddenness, I guess.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, I can have one whenever I want. So I don't need to have 10 of them right now because I can have them whenever. So they just kind of lose their effect that they kind of have on you. So I think that's the thing. It's like, okay, if I'm giving myself permission, then I don't need to eat the whole thing because I can have, maybe I'll take leftovers.
Yeah.
I'll have one tomorrow and I'll have, or whatever that may be.
Yeah. And just so you know, like this is not just like woo-woo stuff, like this is science. Like the term for it is habituation. And the more you expose yourself to something, the less likely it is to cause some big expressive response. And for some people, that response might be binge eating or overeating. But habituate yourself to the food that you would otherwise restrict. So if that means you have one piece of Halloween candy every day for the next month because it's leftover, just have a piece every single day. Like make that the rule now. So you know that when you have one piece today, you don't get triggered. Instead, you're like, oh, I can have one tomorrow. And I'm going to have one the day after that. Oh, I should probably save them so that I can have them the next day and the day after, right? The mindset changes a lot. But something that you mentioned as well, and I think a personal example would lend nicely to this as well, is with our expectations around like indulging and the holidays, just like knowing what kind of goal phase you're in. So, like, for example, I am dieting right now and I'm probably taking it more serious than I have in a while. Thankfully, I haven't gone super low with my calories or anything, but I am dieting. So, I haven't really thought through or like planned out the whole Thanksgiving thing yet with my coach, but my assumption is that I'm probably going to keep on the same numbers, Monday through Wednesday and Friday the day after, and just enjoy the day of on Thanksgiving. And then for the Friendsgiving that we'll probably end up doing, same idea. So like 2 days off track, but otherwise just nailing it otherwise, because at least in the past couple of years at the in-laws, we have Thanksgiving food is great. But at the same time, like because I've been giving myself permission to indulge in all the food every single year now for probably 5 years, I don't know, it doesn't do the same thing for me as it used to, where I'm like, oh my God, I have to get it all in. Like that last supper mentality isn't as strong. Like I literally had like 1.5 plates last time and kind of got sick of it. And then I was just like, I just want to go walk outside. So I think it really does change, not only in the short term of like the day of and that one moment when you give yourself permission, but year over year with the holidays, like the more you just practice, like actually being okay with eating a full plate of whatever the heck is served and not beating yourself up for it because it's not just straight green beans and chicken. Like it kind of dampens the effect like year over year too. So, I mean, that's kind of my plan. But if you have urgent goals, like you're getting married in December and you're dieting for that, or you have a contest prep show, like maybe it's a little different. Maybe you kind of portion your plate a little bit differently and have a little bit more of the turkey breast versus stuffing. But, you have to really look at it in context, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And for me, I'm like, I love Thanksgiving food. Like, love everything about it. Like it's just to me, and especially because I love cooking. So it's so much
Mm-hmm.
fun for me. But then for me too, I'm like, and I love having leftovers. So I'm like, I feel like I get Thanksgiving for the week, but I'm like, but again, I know how to like eat within my goals. So I'm not literally eating a full Thanksgiving meal for like a week
Yeah.
straight. But yeah, but it's different. It's like, yeah, I really, really love Thanksgiving food, but I don't need to eat to the point where I am physically like sick and need to like unbutton my pants. Like I kind of, I know that we talk about this, like I'm like a wine taster, right? Like I just want like a little bit of everything. That's why I'm big into like tapas. Like if you go to a restaurant, I want to split everything, like just want like a little bit of everything. And that to me is like I'm fully satisfied once I have that little bite, because previously I was that person who said, I can't have this, I can't have that, you can't have it. And I would go completely overboard. So now giving myself permission, like I just want a little bit of it. And once I have it, I'm like, done. Like, I know what it tastes like. I'm done.
Yeah. Well, I think, something on the diet side that is a really great strategy to kind of get there with your mentality around food, because you might be listening to this and being like, wow, it must be nice to just like have those habits, or like, oh, it must be nice to think that way about food. Like, that's not where I am. And definitely can relate to that, because I've been in much darker places than I am now. Like, to even hear what I'm saying back, I'm like, wow, we've come a long way. But one exercise you can do that is really, really beneficial is this concept of body food choice congruence. I only learned about this recently, if we're being totally honest, but I will explain it because it has been really helpful for a lot of our clients, which is essentially, it's kind of like a reflection of a before and after when you are eating certain foods. So maybe you try it for Thanksgiving this year and you ask yourself before and after a couple questions like, how did I feel last time I indulged in this thing? What did it make my body feel like? Did it give me sustained energy and satiety? Would I want that feeling that I had again? And then doing that same series of questions after you have the meal. Like, let's say you do it before and after Thanksgiving, reflect on last year and then reflect on the one you just had. And the reason why this is really powerful is because, like, any of us, like you or I, Christina, could tell somebody to give themselves permission or not overindulge and just manage your portions. But it doesn't really land the same way as when you kind of like vocalize or verbalize to yourself, like, this is how I felt. I don't think I would choose this again. In the future, I might want to do it this way. And that's where I like journaling is really powerful. That's why therapy is really powerful, because you hear yourself talk. Like, that is literally the magic of therapy. So, like, body food choice congruence is just a specific exercise geared towards choices around food that don't elicit a ton of guilt or shame of like, oh, I failed and I suck. And it's like, no, it's objective about how did your body feel? And that could be really, really powerful for you to get objective feedback from yourself without judgment of what is actually the choice that you want to make. And then from there, it's like, oh, well, now I know what I want to do. And you can feel confident in that because you came up with it yourself.
Yeah. And I'm thinking back to 2017. Like I had just come off of a contest prep, and like Thanksgiving was like the next week, like 2 weeks later. And that was really difficult. But I mean, I still have pictures on my phone of how, and I had some digestive issues that were
I think
also
you
going on.
sent me those.
How distended my stomach was, like for like a week after. And I was like, oh my, I was so uncomfortable. And for me, I'm like, dude, one meal is not worth that for me. And
Yeah.
like, I would say ever since that Thanksgiving, like I've like been like, I just don't ever want to feel like that again. And I didn't eat a whole lot, but it was a lot more than what I had been used to eating on
Yeah.
contest prep. And so it was a lot of different factors that came into it, but that
Yeah.
has just like stuck out to me in my mind. And like, I just never going back there again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's like an example of an extreme example of body food choice congruence of like, I remember that. That is not a place I want to revisit. And these are the reasons. So yeah. And I think, I mean, lots of things come into play with like the post-contest prep thing, but I mean, in general, we want the theme of what we've been saying is to give yourself permission so that you don't go overboard in any one specific thing. And I mean, the concept that I call that is a hell yeah food or a heck yes food, depending on how PG I need to be. But a hell yes food is essentially just the stuff that like is really worth it to you. Like just give yourself freaking permission for that. Like if it's a cookie or apple pie or stuffing or whatever, and don't shame yourself for it, just enjoy it. But also when you have heck yes foods, you also have foods that aren't in that category. And maybe it's only a few, but like you don't need to have those in copious amounts just because they're there. Right. And so this is where like environment and like family culture can really get tricky, because then there's like peer pressure of like eat more, eat more. And I know in Asian culture it's like they tell you to eat more and then they call you fat, so like you can't win. um but like they're always like, you can't say no to mom or grandma's cooking, you have to eat whatever they put on your plate, and if you do, then they're also going to ridicule you. But they'll call you skinny before you eat and fat after, so like it just doesn't make any sense. But at the same time, it's like that's like a lot of like family culture is like, okay, well then it's like it's established that this family, our family's Thanksgiving, we eat until we have to change into sweats. Like that's a thing. Like, and it can be funny, but it's like that's real for people. So then it's being able to like stand in your own with those decisions, or maybe find ways to make it seem like you're appeasing others when really you're not. So maybe you put a little bit of something on your plate, but you don't actually eat it because it's not a heck yes food, or you have a bite and you're like, yeah, that's not hitting it for me today, I'm going to indulge more in this instead. And yeah, that could be really, really tough. But I mean, try to give yourself permission where you want to actually eat the things, and kind of just, I mean, not even hold back, but just like don't even bother with stuff that doesn't matter to you.
Yeah. And another diet strategy too is to slow down.
Yeah.
And I should have put something on that beforehand too, is don't starve yourself before the meal. Don't,
Yeah.
please do not go into it thinking, okay, well, I'm going to have excess of calories, so therefore I need to not eat anything. Because if that's the case, and if you have Thanksgiving dinner, so 4 or 5, 6 o'clock rolls around, you haven't eaten anything, you are going to go crazy because you're just so hungry. So
Yeah.
that's not to say, okay, well, I'm going to have a big old breakfast buffet and then I'm going to eat this, huge thing for lunch. Like, you can keep it lighter. You
Yeah.
can maybe try to focus a little bit more on like protein, having like an omelet or something for breakfast and something for lunch. But please don't starve yourself, because that's going to make you're going to overeat way more than you would have if you had just eaten normal meals throughout the day, and especially
Oh
like
yeah.
hydrating. So making sure that you're also drinking water is really important.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. I don't really have anything to add to that, but
Yeah.
that's a really, really important point. And then just on the exercise side, I feel like,
Well, sorry, hold on.
oh,
So when you're actually eating, so I think we've talked about this before, just slow down. Like,
yeah.
so that it's going to help if you've eaten meals ahead of time, so you're not super hungry, so you can actually listen to your hunger cues and actually feel like, okay, I'm starting to get full. Because I think sometimes what happens on
Yeah.
Thanksgiving is we're eating so quickly that it's like, oh no, I've actually eaten past that point and I don't feel good. So
Yeah.
trying to slow down, and like before you get a second plate, just kind of like sit there and maybe plan out what you actually want to eat before you do it, and just kind of sit and let your stomach kind of catch up with your head. Because I've been in that position too, where I'm like, oh, I made a second plate, so I might as well just
Yeah.
whatever.
And then you're screwed. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'll also say just one more thing on slowing down too is, you know, this is hard because I feel like the type of person that really struggles with this stuff and listens to this episode can be very food focused on a day like this. However, I think it would be productive to set goals around maybe conversations. Like, can you set a goal that on Thanksgiving at the table, I will start 3 different conversations, or I will tell 2 stories, or I will share 2 things that are going on in my life with the family. Because what that can do is like you're setting kind of a goal that isn't like, I'm going to eat this or not eat this. Like, it's not, you're no longer like tying it back to something that's so personal and difficult, but maybe it's just a exercise to get you talking, which inevitably will slow down how quickly you eat. But it's just kind of an indirect way of doing that. So if you find that you're so food focused that you're just constantly looking at your plate and thinking about the next plate and worrying the whole time that you're at Thanksgiving, I would maybe suggest setting a goal like that to kind of bring the focus away from the food a little bit. And, who knows, you might get lost in conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I really love that because it is really hard to be present. And so I think that that is one of the goals is like, okay, yes, there's food, but that's not the only reason like that this holiday exists. And like kind of being like, I'm here with family. Like, what are some
Yeah.
traditions that you guys do? Like for us, we're big Cowboys fans. So we always have the game on. And that's like something that I just like, it's just super nostalgic for me. Like that makes me think of my childhood. So I love Thanksgiving, big fan.
Yeah.
But anyway, so moving on. So when it comes to exercise, so I think that it's important to note that like it's not a necessity. It's not something that you have to do because I have 100% felt that pressure because like you're on social media and everyone's like Turkey Day 5K or like
Yeah.
pre this and I'm usually like, oh my God, I have so much to cook. I do not have time. And I've always felt like guilty for that. And I'm like, well, maybe I should have gotten up at 3 a.m. or maybe I should have done, and I'm going to try to manage my time a little bit differently this year. But I've always felt guilty for not doing it, especially because I know I'm going to be eating this meal later. But I just think it's important to know that like, if you just don't have time, like if you're the one cooking and it's like you have a lot to prepare and you got to clean the house, and it is not the end of the day. You can work out the day before and you can work out the day after, but you don't have to work out the day of. It's not some like, I don't know, like a Fitspo rule that like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, the calories don't stick to you like just because you didn't work out that day. It's the fallacy is you have to burn off what you eat, otherwise it sticks. And it doesn't
Yeah.
work like that. It's on a much longer time scale that food digests and is used for energy. And you follow all these other things that we said, you probably won't even have overeaten in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, if it's part of your routine and you have nothing to do, if you're just, someone makes the food for you and you just show up and you have the time, then yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I
That's
know.
my Thanksgiving. My mother-in-law is amazing.
So yeah, ours is a little bit different now because, we don't have family. So we are the ones cooking and all that, but don't stress about it. If it's not, if it's not something that you have the time for, or if you're like, you know what, at least I'll just get in like a 20-minute walk or something, at least get my steps in for the day or whatever it may be. Because that's part of the routine, then you can do that. But
Yeah.
don't stress.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess the last thing, I feel like we could do a whole episode on like holiday exercise guide, but like,
Mhm.
so maybe we'll do a part two. But the only other thing would be to not punish yourself after. Like we said, it's a much longer time scale. So you do not need to go do a bunch of cardio or go for an extra long run or do anything to compensate. That's going to trigger a really negative cycle as well. So just stay on whatever normal workout routine you have and keep on that versus trying to add and add and add and compensate as quote unquote punishment for what you ate.
Yeah, yeah, super, super, super important. And especially if you set these expectations for yourself and you do go a little bit over, that's okay. Like there's no punishment, no anything, just get right back to it the next day. Kind of like the example Marissa had is like her coach is probably going to have her on her numbers. Thursday, she just takes the day off and like maybe she'll try to hit her protein or maybe she doesn't care. And then the next day she gets right back to her numbers and they're not going to be different. They're not going to be lower. They're not going to be anything like that. Just back into the normal routine. So
Yeah.
yeah. All right, guys. Well, we hope that you enjoyed this episode. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. You can find both of us on Instagram. You can find me at Christy Lynn Fit and Marissa is at Marissa Roy Fitness. Thank you guys so much for listening. And we hope to see you back next week.